in the past, you didn't have as many people come up and approach you and say thank you. I mean, that happens a lot nowadays, whether it's uniformed officers that might be at lunch somewhere or something like that. People picking up their checks and just, saying thanks and anonymously doing that. And I think that is a good byproduct of some of the negative things that have happened in the last few years. And I'm very appreciative of Decatur because I believe that despite a lot of the negativity that has went across the country around policing, Decatur has not suffered from that nearly as bad. Our news media, I think, is very fair to us and good to us. Our community is very fair and good to us. The city council and the city leaders have always, been good, and even more so.
Welcome back to Season 2 of the 217 podcast, presented by Decatur Earth Mover Credit Union and hosted by me, Jess Younghouse. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to the 217 podcast. Today we have Officer Chief Shane Brandel.
That's one way to say it.
Is that one way to say it?
Yeah.
From the Decatur Police Department. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
First off, I just want to get a little bit of background about Shane Brandel, the guy. Are you from Decatur? Kind of what brought you here and your backstory.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in El Paso, Illinois, which is just north of Bloomington. My mom and dad were divorced. My dad was a Bloomington firefighter. And then my stepdad actually was the chief of police in El Paso where I grew up. So I had a lot of other family members that were police officers. And so I was exposed to that, at a young age. And it that's kind of what appealed to me in terms of my career or career choice, I guess. And so interesting, I had actually tried to go into the military right out of high school. I had a back surgery that kept me from doing that. And so I figured, all right, I'll go to college. I had to wait like a year before I could even attempt to join the military at that point. So I went to college. I went to Western Illinois University. And I graduated high school in 1993. I'm 48 years old. So it was a little different era, I guess, of college and whatnot. Western was different, definitely then than it is now. I think the enrollment at Western is half what it was when I was there.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. And when I go back to Macomb, it's like I'm in a totally different town here. It just feels weird.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went to Western and started classes there. And after my first year or second year, I tried to go into the military again. And at that point, that was during the Clinton downsizing era. And the back issue is what kept me out of the military. So I just dedicated myself to the school and then getting into law enforcement at that point.
What was your major at Western?
So my major was law enforcement and justice administration, and my minor was computer science.
Okay.
So honestly, the only reason that I picked computer science as a minor is because I had more classes in that field than anything else when I had to actually declare. Okay. It was either Spanish or computer science, and I figured computer science might help me a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that was some pretty good foresight, I guess.
Yeah, so while in college, I had a good time. It was a high school buddy of mine. We were roommates first couple of years, and I joined a fraternity there in college and enjoyed my time. And I will say, though, I was ready to get out, when I was done. I think most everybody feels that way when they're done with college. And I graduated college in December of 96. And at that point, it was different for law enforcement. It was really hard to get into law enforcement.
Oh, okay.
We would go around, you would test with whoever was testing at the time. Okay. And it may be, most cities would test every 2 years. So you kind of, and they would establish lists. And for like comparison, when I tested in Decatur in it would have been 96, I think it was. Yeah, it was the summer of 96. Okay. There was like 600 people that were testing with me for 20 spots. Okay. And so
that's very competitive.
Yeah, and every city I went to is that way. Okay. I tested in a handful of places, and they were all like that. And so for me, it was interesting. So you asked like how I ended up in Decatur, and the truthful answer to that is back then you went where you got a job. Sure. Law enforcement today, if you're a good candidate, you can pick where you want to go. Yeah. And today, or back then, it was you went where the job was. Sure. I grew up and like I said, right, in Central Illinois, and so I wasn't opposed to necessarily staying in Central Illinois, but I will say that it wasn't like at the top of my list, if I'm being truthful. But they called, and like I said, I graduated in December '96. I had a job, and at that time I stopped. When I had that job, I was working for a state's attorney's office where I grew up, and I had decided that if I didn't get one of the jobs that I had already put in for, I was going to go back and get my master's degree at ISU.
Okay.
And then once I finished that, then I'd go back out into the job market.
Okay.
And Decatur called. I think it was like January, February, I think that they called for me to go and start in April of 97.
Okay.
So I came to Decatur, and I started here April 9th of 1997, and then I went off to the State Police Academy, which is where we went back then, and did my basic training there and stuff. So, and what's interesting is I graduated the police academy, which the State Police Academy, and back then it was even more so, it was like a military style basic training. And so it wasn't, in my opinion, necessarily an enjoyable experience. It was an experience, but it was
different than college.
Definitely differently from the fraternity house in college. Yeah. So, but it's funny. I tell these guys now, even going to the academy, and I'm like, just shut your mouth and do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's what I tell my kids.
Yeah, don't put a spotlight on yourself. Yeah, it's the academy. If you want attention, that's not the place to do it.
Sure.
And so anyway, I graduated the academy, and I think that summer, I think 2 of the top 3 agencies that I had wanted to go to called me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
What were they?
One was Aurora, and the other one was Cincinnati. Oh. And then there was another one. I tested with LAPD.
Okay.
And I had to do an appeal process for color vision, and I had went through that, and I had scored high enough to be hired with them. But I really didn't want to be out there anyway. Yeah. That was I had 3 fraternity brothers that were LAPD cops. And so I went and tested and stayed with them. And that was just kind of if this happens, I'll stay there a couple years and then come back.
Sure.
Wasn't where I wanted to live and kind of have a family.
That's a totally different world out there.
Yeah. So the other interesting dynamic to my story of even getting here is my now wife. So my now wife and I met our first semester of our freshman year in college.
Okay.
And we'd been together the whole time. And so, we were like, what's she going to do? And so she was finishing her last semester at Western as well. And when I got started here, and so when she graduated, she came and moved here to Decatur and ended up getting a job and started her career here.
Okay, cool.
So it was interesting because just trying to break into the environment or the workforce that she wanted to, and managing all of that. And so I started here, and I'll be honest, I didn't know if I would stay. But again, you got to remember the times back then. It wasn't easy to jump around, and I thought about the state police, and I decided against that because I loved the urban policing element of things, the action of it, and I just could not see myself as a road trooper. Okay. I would have been way too bored. Yeah. So it just wasn't for me.
At what point do you feel like you wanted to start pursuing like administrative police work?
Yeah, so it's interesting, I think I've always had the ambition, and to say I want to continue doing things, but for me, I've kind of taken it on a step-by-step thing. I might have had a long-term goal. I remember my long-term goals of I'd like to retire as a deputy chief.
Okay.
And that would have been probably early on. But every if I had moved to a different department, it might have been a little different. But the rank structure within DPD, that was kind of my goal early. And I never had the goal of being the chief. I might have thought about it at times, but I don't really have that goal because a lot of times that chief position is timing, politics, and some of that stuff. So, but I felt that I could attain any of the other ranks based on merit. and performance. So that's kind of what I set my sights on. But, again, and backing that up, okay, that's a long-term goal. What do you do? How do you get there?
Yeah.
And for me, and I've had this conversation with many of the officers, everybody's different. Everybody is unique in how they view their career and what's important to them. Some people want the stability of a given shift or an assignment or something, whether it's they want day shift, or if they get to a position where it's a Monday through Friday day shift type thing. That's what's important to them. Maybe whatever in their lives is that provides that provides them the ability to do those things. For me, I've never really thought that way.
Okay.
And the reason is, for me, or for anybody really, you spend over a third of your life at work. And, when you're working overtime and other stuff, you're spending more than that at work. So if I'm not happy with my work, then it's going to affect everything else. And that balance is there on the other side too. If you're not happy at home, it's going to affect your work.
Right.
So you have to have that balance. And for me, that balance has always been, at least for work, to love what I'm doing. And so my thought and philosophy and processes for me has always been to stay ahead of that, right? So what do I want to do? What makes me happy at work and the things that I enjoy? When I was a patrol officer, I loved being a patrol officer. I loved the action of it. I liked the era of that time and things. My next step was I went to the street crimes unit. I thought that would be a good opportunity, and some people call it luck, because of how things play out, in terms of when openings occur, how many openings happen. I don't ever say that it's luck in that regard, and there's a reason for that. I always say that it's when preparation meets opportunity.
Yep.
If you're not preparing every single day for the opportunities you're looking for, when those opportunities come along, you won't get them because you haven't prepared.
Right.
And so maybe the timing worked out or whatnot, but if you ain't ready for it,
right,
somebody else is.
Yes.
Right? There's 150 guys that are competing for spots, and if you ain't out there busting it every day, somebody's going to just blow right by you. And so my first promotion was to our street crimes unit.
Okay.
And that's kind of our plain clothes. And back then, our street crimes unit was a little bit different, but you do burglaries, robberies, prostitution, drugs, a lot of surveillance stuff. That was horrible. I hated doing surveillance. It was so boring. You might sit in a van for 12 hours.
Is it? That's real.
That is real.
You literally would just sit there and watch.
Yeah, and there's horror stories of that too. Of what do you do when you got to go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah. So save jugs of your old milk. That's what you got to do. I hated that. I remember there's a good story. We were doing a search warrant on a house for drugs, and I was in the surveillance van, and it was July, and it was one of the hottest days of the year. And it was over 100 degrees outside. And so I'm in this van, and I swear I'm starting to hallucinate. I'm drenched. I'd stripped down to my underwear, and I got on the radio and I said, "You guys, if you're not hitting this, I'm done. I can't be here. I really feel like I'm starting to hallucinate."
Yeah.
And so they said, we're coming right now. So I waited, and they hit the house, and I jumped out of that van, and I'm in my underwear soaking wet. And that 100-degree heat felt like I just jumped into the air conditioning.
Oh, no.
It was so horrible.
That's so bad. That's not the story you should tell people that want to get into policing.
But that's policing, right? Especially if you think that undercover work is cool, all glamorous and cool. Yeah, there's some cool stuff to it, but there's some not so cool stuff. But so from there, I did 2 years in street crimes, and then I went into our investigations division or criminal investigation division. So our criminal investigation division is actually broken into 3 units. One is adult criminal investigations that does every crime from theft to murder.
Okay.
And doesn't involve juvenile offenders or serious juvenile victims.
Okay.
Our juvenile unit, then juvenile offender crimes, and then like child abuse, sex crimes against juvenile. Our juvenile handles that, and then our street crimes unit.
Okay.
So I went from street crimes into the adult side, and I spent, I think, about 3.5 years there, and I really enjoyed that. I mean, I love my time in street crimes. I love my time, and then I went into the adult. I loved that. Being a detective was that goal, that first goal, right? And so investigating just anything, all the way up to the murders. And, I found that very satisfying to be able to investigate serious crimes, bring closure, not only to the victims, but the community.
Sure.
And, if I'm being honest, put somebody that belonged in jail in jail. So sometimes that's a game. I mean, you almost got to play it as a game. They say a lot of times a good detective is one can go out into the private sector and be a fantastic salesman, because I have to convince you it's in your best interest to confess to a crime that's going to put you in prison for the next 30 years. Sometimes you're good at it, sometimes not. Sometimes there are some people that are very good at it and others not. But so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the cat and mouse game of doing that, and the cerebral side of the policing element. It really changed kind of the way I kind of saw things. And to this day, I believe that there's extreme value in, as you go through the ranks, to have done some time in investigations, because you view things differently.
Sure.
You think about how you put together cases and what's important, good questions to ask, why this links to that. And so I really enjoyed that element of it. Where it was bad is, this was back before the days of like cell phone emails. And I mean, I think I had a Nextel, those push to talks back then.
Chirp, chirp.
Yeah. And so I had a bad habit of, at 2:00 in the morning, I'd wake up and I would start thinking about my cases that I had going, and I couldn't go back to sleep. Because I didn't want to forget hey, that's a good question to ask, especially if I knew I had like an interrogation the next day or some good, important interview. So I started putting a notepad next to my bed and started writing down notes so I wouldn't forget.
You see that. I feel like you see that in like TV, like true crime TV shows, whatever. Is that, would you say, like ones that really chronicle a detective's journey through a case? Is that realistic?
That's absolutely realistic. And I mean, as I've talked to other detectives, they experience the same thing. How they manage it's different. Today it's a little different, because the same thing happens to me even right now. I'll think of things as I wake up. Sunday nights are the worst for me, because through the weekend I know I've got a bunch coming on Monday mornings, and I start thinking, and so now what I just send myself an email. And then, so it's the same note systems. That way I can put it out of my head and go back to sleep. Because otherwise I'll fear forgetting what it is that's popped into my head. So anyway, so from there, I got promoted to sergeant, and I went back to patrol on the midnight shift. Okay. Which I loved, the midnight shift. I loved being a sergeant on that situation, or in that setting. You have a lot of young officers that are eager and excited to go out and do their job, but they're also sponges because they're still learning to do their jobs. And so I say my time on third shift as a sergeant has been by far, to this very day, the most fun I had. Right? And even to some extent, it's very fulfilling being able to work with those young officers and help, kind of develop them. So I did a short stint in administration as a sergeant. At that time, it was doing training, recruiting, stuff like that. I absolutely hated it. I was too young at the time. I think at that time I might have been 32 years old.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I just missed the action of midnights. So I went back to midnights. And then from there, I went to day shift patrol as a supervisor. Again, I did not care for that. I was too bored. And so an opening came up in investigations as a supervisor in adult investigations. I went there, and I think I was there from 2011 to 2015.
Okay. Was that the longest period of time you spent?
Probably
in
one spot.
Okay.
I will say that up to this point, that might have been the longest.
Okay.
Right at 4 years, I think, is the most I'd spent in one spot. 4.5. I think I was there, about that. And then I got promoted to lieutenant. I went back to midnights.
Okay.
And so I was a shift commander there. I wasn't there long, maybe only about 6 months, and then I got moved to administration. At that point, we were going through some transitions with our dispatch, and so I oversaw our dispatch, again, some of our training, recruiting, internal affairs type stuff. So I did that from 15 to fall of 16. I got promoted to deputy chief. I remained in administration. Was there, I think, till 18, and then I got moved to patrol in 18, and so I was division commander of patrol. And then in July of 21, I got promoted to chief.
Okay.
So, and I've been doing that for a little over 2 years now as a chief. So that's kind of the progression of my career. And
that's a lot of different
done a lot of different things. And so to my original point of, trying to keep in mind, what is it you want to do and how do you want to get there? I always appreciate those that have been around, because they just bring so many different ideas and thoughts to the table. But for me, it was not necessarily as much that as it was just keeping myself happy with what I'm doing.
Sure.
And enjoying what I'm doing. Because if I came to work every day and I didn't like what I was doing, then I'd be miserable. And then that would translate into, how things are at home and your relationship with friends and everything. So for me, it's worked out great. And so I've been on now Decatur 26 and a half years, coming up on 27 years. And so I'm kind of at the tail end of my career. I probably have 2 to 3 years left, and that.
Yeah. So you said you're 48?
Yep.
Is that young in terms of police chief?
Yes, I would say so. So I was actually 21 years old. The interesting thing, when I tested here in Decatur, you had to be 21 by July 12th of 1996.
Okay.
I turned 21 July 10th.
Okay.
So I was 2 days old enough to be able to even test with Decatur.
Sure. Okay.
And so I came, and I was young. I was 21 years old. When I graduated the academy, I graduated in late June of 96, and I turned 22 in July, July 10th. And so I was pretty young. And it was interesting because I remember testing with another large agency, and I was very high on their scores. And I go into the oral interview, and they kind of drill me about being so young and if I'm really ready for that. And, I think that's always on a case-by-case basis. Everybody's life experience is different.
Sure.
But I will say I totally understand where they were coming from now in retrospect, right? Because it was a huge culture shock for me, especially coming from a small town, and just growing up. I'm still a kid at 22 years old.
That's what I was going to say. When you think about 22-year-olds, you sometimes feel like you're that young, but those are children.
Well, I think about it because my own daughters, I have twin daughters, and they're 21 years old. Yeah. And there is no way they would be ready to do this job in a mature fashion right now.
Is that changed by generation?
I yes and no.
Yeah.
Because I think life experience speaks to a lot of it. I've seen some 21-year-olds, especially some of those that might have been in the military and come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Different mindset. They had to grow up real fast. Sure. And in a type of environment that is like nothing else. Right. And so it's situational, because I've seen some 30-year-olds that aren't mature yet. It is what it is.
That's right. So
the way the policing compensation type thing works, and specifically our pension, dictates a lot of time. How long officers stay. Yep. So first off, in a municipal city like us, we're mandated to retire by the time we're 63 years old. Okay. However, I've only known a few people to ever stay that long. Really? Most of us, because we can start drawing our pension at 50, most are in that 50 to 55 range.
Sure, they're ready to...
and so like for me, getting hired at 21 years old, I'll max my pension out at 51 years old at 30 years. So in 3.5 years, I will have maxed my pension out.
Yep.
But I can draw it in 1.5 years.
Sure.
When I turn 50. So I could retire in 1.5 years, draw my pension, go do another job, whatever, or not.
Right.
However that works out. Or I stay another 1.5 years or so and max it out and then leave it.
Sure.
So I will say that maybe age-wise, it's probably younger than a chief, but time-wise, no.
Yeah.
I've got 26 plus years on. That's pretty normal, I would say, for a larger city chief to have that kind of time. Because it takes to go through your career and kind of rise through those ranks. It takes time.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to just talk about socially. How does being a police officer affect your social life through the years, and I guess your family life too? Like, how do you get to be a normal person socially, or do you have to be different?
Yeah, so I guess that that's an interesting question. It's hard for people that aren't police officers to understand, I think. So I'm married. I've been married. It'll be 25 years in October. I have two daughters, or twins, or 21. And so, when I'm out in public, it's I can't be. I shouldn't say that. I have to be guarded.
Sure.
Especially as the chief of police, people know who I am, and it's pretty unusual that when I go out somewhere that somebody doesn't know who I am.
Sure.
Now, because of that, I know that they know who I am, and it's usually on a friendly basis. Most people have always been good. They'll say something to me, thank me for my service or whatnot. But for every one of those, I also know there's probably somebody that doesn't like me.
Sure.
They know who I am, and they're just waiting for me to make a mistake. Now, I'm more high profile, and I understand that. But even when I was, I'll back up, and when I was a young officer, I was pretty active on the street, and so I interacted with a lot of some interesting characters, we'll say. And so my wife and I would go to the mall, and I'd have people shouting out my name. So people just knew who I was. So you got to be mindful of that.
Sure.
So to this day, that's always been an issue. My wife and I and our kids now have an understanding of, if something happens with me, this is what you need to do.
Sure.
To protect yourself, I'll take care of me, and stuff like that. And, but also just being mindful that people are watching me. So for example, if I go out to dinner, me and my wife go out to dinner, here in town, and she wants to have a margarita with her with dinner, I will not drink.
Sure.
At all. Even if it's one beer, because somebody might just be waiting for me. They're going to take a picture of me, and then they're going to show me driving away or something like that. And then it just blows up into something that it's not. And vice versa. If we go out and I want to have a drink, then she won't. And I'm not saying that's not a responsible thing to do anyway, but at the same time, one drink is different than 10.
Right.
So
there's extremes.
Yeah. But at the same time, I know that I would just be giving somebody that opportunity. I don't go to places, like bars that are just asking for trouble for somebody like me.
You don't pop into Woody's on your way home.
I do not.
Close.
No. Although, when I was young, that was a different bar back then, and some cops would frequent that place. But no, I don't. And to be honest, we have those conversations within the police department with all the officers of being mindful of where you're at and what you're doing. I'm not saying don't go out and enjoy your life and have fun and be a normal human being, but at the same time, you have to understand what you do for a living, and that people are watching. On top of that, we're held to a different standard.
Yes.
When what we do off duty, we're held to account at work as well.
Sure.
If you work at Caterpillar, they probably don't care if you get into a bar fight. We do.
Sure.
We have a public image to maintain. And so therefore what you do on duty and off duty matters.
Sure.
And so
what are the conversations you have to have around social media?
With officers? Yeah. So we have those quite a bit about watching what you say. Don't go down that hole of getting into debates with people on social media. They're trying to bait you. It's no different, honestly, than some of the conversations that you'd have on the street.
Sure.
People are trying to bait you into doing or saying something that you shouldn't be doing. They'll do the same thing, only worse, on social media, because they can hide behind a computer or a phone to do it. So just don't take the bait. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? If you're gonna be on social media, keep it limited. If you know officers on social media, it's very rare that they use their name,
right,
or identify themselves as a police officer. I'm very different. I do have my name just because, again, of the position, but you'll almost never see me post anything on social media, and I rarely comment. And if I do, it's happy birthday, or awesome. Yeah. I won't engage in conversations. I won't do it. Yeah. First off, I think it's absurd to do that no matter who you are. I think social media is really a detriment at times in society.
It's not a good platform.
I think it started out maybe as something cool and then has turned to just something disgusting in my opinion. Yep. So
let's see.
I will say though, on that note of the social thing, I find it very, I'm very appreciative when somebody does recognize me and they come up and they just say, thank you for your service. I appreciate what you do. And so do all the officers. So it's not that that's not welcome. Yeah. It just sometimes we don't know who you are and you're coming up to us and so we don't know how that's going to go until it gets there. But
okay, I guess I'm glad you said that, because how has the environment and society changed so that even maybe 20 years ago, that's something that an officer would not have thought twice about, or had an issue with somebody coming up with an open hand to shake their hand and say, thank you for your service. And fast forward to today, and you're not sure, like, how does the environment affect how you do these sort of day-to-day things that 20 years ago were not even a big deal?
Yeah, I'll say even 20 years ago, you had to be mindful of it. I mentioned the story of being in the mall. That was 25 years ago. And so that's always been that way to a degree. A lot of officers will say that when they go into a building or if they sit down, they want to be in a specific position. I'm the same way. I really hope that I can get to a point in my life when I don't have to feel like I need to do that. But that's, just kind of how we're wired at the time. So we've always had to be cautious of things like that. Like when we go into McDonald's in uniform, most of us will not do that. If we can't see you preparing our food, we won't do it. That's no different 25 years ago than it is today. Because unfortunately we know there's plenty of people that would just love to do something stupid. I would say in today's environment, it's just, again, being mindful of your surroundings and also understand though, what's interesting today, and especially in the last couple of years, and even more so, I really truly believe here in Decatur is people being openly supportive of you. In the past, you didn't have as many people come up and approach you and say thank you. I mean, that happens a lot nowadays, whether it's uniformed officers that might be at lunch somewhere or something like that, people picking up their checks and just, saying thanks and anonymously doing that. And I think that is a good byproduct of some of the negative things that have happened in the last few years. And that, I'm very appreciative of Decatur, because I believe that despite a lot of the negativity that has went across the country around policing, Decatur has not suffered from that nearly as bad. Our news media, I think, is very fair to us and good to us. Our community is very fair and good to us. The city council and the city leaders have always, been good, and even more so of recent. We have not had that. A city council person calling for us to have our staff reduced by 50% or saying ridiculous things about police openly. And we just haven't had that. Yeah. Now, it's still hard because on the national level, you still see some of that, and some of the national media just waits for something to go wrong so they can pounce on it.
Are local communities jaded by that national media?
So.
Like I locally, and just knowing people I know, I guess, would have understood and agreed with what you just said, that Decatur is very supportive of their police. But when the national media is so polarizing and so absolute and negative about policing, I feel like community members can be easily jaded, especially young people.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where we see it the most is with younger people, because they don't have the life experience yet. They haven't had those relationships maybe with law enforcement officers. And so let's be honest, when you're young, you have this view of what utopian world is, and then you actually live part of your life and you realize that ain't how it is. So I think that social media and some of that national media narrative certainly has an impact there. I also think it has a major impact on those that might be on the fence looking for some reason anyway.
Sure.
You just pushed them right where they wanted to go. But again, I really speak highly of Decatur and it's the local community here and all of our partners, again, the city leaders, officials, and the media alike. I mean, I can't say enough good things about how the city council and the city manager has treated us and given us the things that we need. It's funny because it's funny, but not funny, but it is funny. It's funny for me that many of the other department directors in the city will say if they really want something bad enough, they'll have me ask for it.
Yeah. Yep.
Because the council's been so supportive to kind of give me all the tools we need, because we're coming out of a situation that has really hurt the department and caused some staffing issues. Public image issues and stuff like that we're trying to rebuild from. And we're getting there. We're doing a great job, I think. And then, we'll be back to full staff soon. Yeah. But that doesn't come without that support of the council.
How does more statewide politics affect the police?
Yeah. So, we saw that more here recently with the Safety Act and this Pretrial Fairness Act. Politics is politics. The people elect who they want to represent them, and they know the positions of those people. So I kind of view it as that's the will of the people, and so whatever direction that we go, that's the way it goes. If you don't like who represents you, vote against them. Sure. When it came to the Safety Act and for us, the Decatur Police Department, we had to change very few things operational because we had already made those changes years in advance. And some of it to us was trivial in terms of why are we arguing that this shouldn't happen, right? Professionalism in policing, mandated certain training hours. Right. I mean, come on. Yeah. Who doesn't want that out of their police departments? Having conversations about use of force and changing the narratives on that. I mean, the thing about policing and use of force is it is going to happen, and use of force is not pretty. Never once have I made any use of force scenario look like some ballet. It's violent, and it is what it is. So when it's necessary, we just need to support the what had to happen. But at the same time, we as the police need to make sure then we use the necessary force and we toe the line on that. I've always said to my officers, if you got to use force, use force. Right. I'll always support you using force, but you just need to keep it in the boundaries. And when it's done, it's done. You do that, I'll support you. Sure. And I honestly, since I've been the chief, I don't believe we've issued any discipline whatsoever for use of force matters. And so the Safety Act, again, we were there. And the Pretrial Fairness Act, that's an unknown. This starts actually next Monday in terms of the bail reform. And that's really an unknown, and I don't know what to expect out of it. I do see some positives that can come from it. For example, they call them detainable offenses. I've seen people that have been charged with murder that bonded out. Sure. That were violent criminals, but they just happen to have the money and they bonded out. The cash. And at the other end of that spectrum, I've seen people sit in jail for 6 months for a low-level charge that they didn't really need to sit in jail for. Right. So I think there can be some positives that come from it. I hope that then if and when we see that some corrections need to be made, that our legislators have the courage to do it, and they do it. Yep. I will say the one thing about state politics that is frustrating at times is that we oftentimes downstate get controlled by what happens in Chicago, and that feels oftentimes, like, I don't know, you're just being left out or ignored. And it's frustrating then when our local politicians just toe the line with those Chicago Democrats instead of representing their districts.
Right. Yep.
That's frustrating.
Yep.
Republican or Democrat, I don't care.
Yeah,
you know?
that is not the same environment that it is.
And represent your district and what the people of your district want to see.
Sure.
And I think when you do that, we kind of, if Illinois is to start to do that, you'll see it go right back to the center.
Right.
Unfortunately, now we're on extreme ends on both sides of the aisle on that.
Yes.
And it's what happened to the middle where probably 70% of our citizens want to be.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, that's how I am politically. I'm a centrist for the most part. I'll go either way on the issue because it's not about whether it's an R or a D. It's what do I feel is best, and,
sure.
And to be fair, that changes over time. I can promise you there are things that I thought were right when I was 20 years old.
Oh, yeah.
That today I have a different viewpoint.
Sure.
And that goes back to what you said about, kids and sometimes being jaded in their, I shouldn't say jaded, that's unfair. Their perspectives are different based on life experience.
Sure. Yep.
So I call it jaded because they haven't lived it.
Yeah, right.
But
Yep.
But I was there too. I did the same thing. So
let's talk about technology in policing.
Sure.
And I want to talk about training your officers and how that looks different and that whole spectrum.
Yeah. So we'll talk the technology side first. So when I started, there was zero technology, right? I hand wrote reports. There was like 2 typewriters in the report room if you needed to do that. We had one sergeant that was notorious for if you made a mistake on a page, he'd rip the whole thing up and you'd have to rewrite the whole page and be like, all right, you just wanted me to hate you, don't you?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of that? I don't know, but nonetheless. So we come from that to then starting to have video cameras in our cars. Then we had video cameras in the interrogation rooms and, everything in between, some of the software programs we have to be able to analyze cell phones, HD surveillance technology that we have, body cams, all that stuff is weird. Now, what's interesting to me, and I'm going to talk in-car videos, interrogation, and body cams specifically. When in-car videos came along, nobody wanted to have the in-car videos. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be big brothered all the time. Then they saw the value of it.
Sure.
When they would make a stop and something would go wrong or whatnot, and this is a common theme and that happens with us if we stop just a random person for speeding. It's very common that we'll get complaints that officer was rude.
Okay.
Well, before cameras, the officer would say, nope, I just approached and did my thing and that's it. And you couldn't substantiate it either way.
Right.
When that started, all we had to do is hit play. And it was interesting because it confirmed what we believed. 99.9% of the time, the officer was about as professional as they could be.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, whether the person's just lying or that was just their perception of the interaction because it was negative for them, so they perceive the officer. That's one of the things that I'll get. If I get into a group of people, and I hate this, and most cops do, so those that are listening, pay attention. If you don't know this officer, don't tell them about your story about how you got stopped by somebody and that officer was such a jerk, because I guarantee they're looking at you saying, no, you were the jerk. I guarantee it. Yeah. Guarantee it. And then they won't talk to you anymore. Yeah. So it's just, and by when we watch those videos, it's so redundant in that. So guys started, hey.
Usually when I've been pulled over a few times for speeding, they were usually pretty nice. Yeah. I don't feel like I've ever been mistreated
so I think
for my actions.
And sometimes it's just that they're direct, right? I'm just, here you are, here's my name, here's why I stopped you. Do you have your license? Okay, here's your citation, and they're out. Yeah. It's not that they were rude, it's just they just were straightforward, and here it is. It's like, I'm not offering you my phone number or anything. It's like, what do you want? So the same thing, it was an interesting, when I was in detectives, is when they started to roll out the interrogation, the recordings for that. Now, we would do it using after you do an interrogation, and then you would go record the confession, right? Later. So, and that actually, again, coming from Chicago, the law of recording homicide investigations or interrogations for homicides. I started to record it for everything.
Sure.
And a lot of our older detectives, nope, I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. Why do we have to do it? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was great because it's like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I actually got tired of having to testify to what somebody confessed to, and then they get on the stand and say they never said that.
Right.
Or that I coerced a confession out of them or whatnot, which never happened. So again, I started using it for everything. And there's one case that stands out to me. It was an armed robbery case. A guy committed 3 armed robberies. He confessed to 2 of them to me. Pretty easy interrogation, nothing to it. He goes to trial, and they tried to claim that I coerced the confession out of him. All they did was hit play on the interrogation, and it took the jury 15 minutes to convict him. He got sentenced to 20 years in prison for armed robbery. Yeah. So to me, it's, again, let me do it.
Like a win-win.
Yeah. And so fast forward to body cams, you had a strong resistance to body cams initially. And again, I want to be fair to the officers that have that resistance. Imagine if you're at work and at your job, you're being recorded at everything you do.
The thought of that's what I was just going to bring up. Like the thought of feeling like I have to be recorded to make sure that I'm doing the right thing when deep down, I know I do the right thing every day, and I don't need something over my shoulder to prove that because I know that I'm doing it.
Yeah, or the feeling of, well, they're just going to start watching my stuff just to wait for me to make a mistake.
Correct. Watching for the misstep.
Yeah, so I get the hesitation of it. I really do. But again, as we've rolled these out and now we've had them, in use for 5-6 years now, our officers won't go on the street without them.
Sure.
Because they know the value of it.
There's too much benefit.
Everything is that they're, that they try to verbalize. I promise you, if I took you on a ride along on a Friday night in the summer, you would think that there is a parallel universe out there. The world that these guys live in and work in is nothing like you would ever imagine.
Right.
And so for them to try to explain that at times is hard if you're not in that world or if you haven't been in it.
Right.
So we get in on the police side, but the public a lot of times just doesn't get it. They don't see it. And I don't blame them for that.
That's not their natural.
No. And when you try to explain that, they just can't fully comprehend it. But they do when I play a video.
Sure.
Or when you have a use of force scenario, you can there it is. It's easy to see. There's no question about what may happen or what didn't happen. And same thing with the interactions you might have with people. And our complaints have dropped to almost none.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first got promoted to sergeant in 2005, we were running 60, 70 complaints a year.
Okay.
Constantly doing complaint investigations.
Yeah.
We have 5 to 10 right now in a year.
Whew.
And 7 of those will be unsubstantiated.
Sure. Quickly.
Yes. Yeah, because and the efficiency of being able to investigate the complaint because it's all on video. Right. And so and it's an interesting byproduct because now people know everything's recorded. They don't make complaints.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. So, the technology there has been phenomenal. And again, just in our everyday thing, cell phones are a big thing. Everybody has their lives or their cell phones, and they love to commit crimes on their cell phones or document the fact that they've committed crimes. So that's a huge piece of evidence. Every single, crime we have. And, to be able to, break into or crack into a phone and then download all that information, check your Google search. How many times have homicides been kind of solved by somebody's Google search history? And
the rest of us are sitting here like, man, when are they going to learn? You can't be using Google like that.
And they do it all the time, right? On the positive side of that, to that point on the body cam stuff and being recorded, those that may have been predisposed to do their own thing or break the rules or disgrace, our badges, they're less inclined to do that because they're going to be, on video doing it. And when they do it, because it still happens to this day, we're able to, deal with it quickly. So, I don't even want to talk about that too much because I've been very fortunate not to have serious misconduct. But we've all seen some of the videos and it's like, what are you doing? But to your point, and what we were just saying, not to do that on your Google search, but people do it. Officers know not to do that on body cams, but they'll do it.
They do it anyway.
But the good thing is, There it is.
Yep.
You can't argue or make up some story,
Yep.
and now you're gone. You're done. So, because to that point, the person who hates a bad cop more than anybody is a good cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they make all of us look bad.
Yeah. Yep. And that's not why you're in it.
Yeah.
Not why you chose to get in it. What is the best way for you guys to share with the public what it's like to be an officer? Like, what are some things the public can engage in to really get a better understanding?
Well, first, I'll tell you what not to do.
Okay.
Don't watch don't watch television.
Okay.
Because your 1 hour shows are nothing like policing. We do not, solve the, a complex DNA related homicide in 1 hour.
Okay. Noted.
So, I hate it. It's funny. My dad he loves watching cop shows. And I'm like, and he's like, did you watch this? You watch this? No, I don't. It's
Chicago PD is a big one.
He loves that one. He loves
People love that.
And he'll be like, is this really? No, it's not that way. No, this is why juries are tainted, because they think that it is.
100%.
And so, it's really hard because you can't bring the public in to do ride-alongs for the most part. We don't allow that just because.
Sure.
There's certain, elements that need to be met before we do that. But one of the things that we have found and been doing here recently in the community to try to give some sense of the difficulty making decisions is we have a simulator.
Okay.
And the Howard G. Buffett has a simulator as well. So there's 3 of them in town. One that the Howard G. Buffett Foundation has, the Decatur Police Department has, and then also the McCletsy, the Law Enforcement Training Center down there. So there's 3 of those. And the Howard G. Buffett Foundation is partnered into the community with this Public Safety Foundation to bring community members in and use the simulator. If you've never done that, I highly suggest that you do it.
I've witnessed people doing it. I chose not to partake, but I was in the room commenting play by play.
Yeah, so we use that as a training mechanism for real life scenarios and scenario based training. And what's interesting is when the officers go through it, they almost always get it right, what they're supposed to do.
Sure.
Right. And when we put the civilians in it, they almost always get it wrong because they don't have the training. They have not been involved in high stress decision making and all of that. Now, where the problems come in is when the citizens seem to think that the officers can't ever get it wrong, right?
Right.
And if you've seen some of those scenarios, there is no right answer. It's you got to make the best decision of a very bad scenario, right? And how easy it can be to make a wrong decision. And the problem and the struggle that police officers have had, especially in the last few years, is how the public reacts or what the public expects then if they make a bad decision or if they make a wrong decision. And there's this instant, let's say it's an officer-involved shooting incident, and there's this instant, oh, they were wrong, you need to indict them or send them to prison. And it's like, wait a minute. You've asked them to make a potentially life or death decision in the snap of a finger.
Right.
And maybe it didn't go the way it should have, but should they lose their freedom for that?
Right.
I mean, come on. I put you in a scenario where there's no real life consequences and you got it wrong.
Right. Probably 9 times out of 10 in the same scenario. Really.
So I like to say, imagine then being in those scenarios when the consequences are real. Meaning, if you do the wrong thing, now we're going to indict you for that. Or you don't do what you should have done and you're dead for it.
Right.
Right? In the last 3 years, we've had 6 officer-involved shootings, 2.5 years. 3 of our officers have been shot, and the consequences are real. We know that, and if they have to hesitate because they're afraid of something that the public may have some backlash or discipline or
social impact,
whatever, it's like that literally can cost them their lives. And I don't want them to think that. What I would rather have is the public understand that you're not expected to be perfect, but we expect the training, we expect the professionalism to be there.
Yeah.
And when those mistakes are made, it's made for understandable circumstances.
Sure. It's an absolutely unfair expectation.
It is. I mean, I tell my officers all the time, it's like, I don't expect you to be perfect. You can't go out there and do this job and be perfect. These lawyers and these people that like to criticize, they have months and years to pick away at what you did in 3 seconds.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, think about that. A lawyer's like, okay, I've analyzed this frame by frame over the course of the last 2 weeks, and here's what I found he did wrong.
Yep.
You can't do that. That's not fair.
Then the gentleman that runs the simulator that the public can go see explained a situation where he's in policing and going through this whole real life scenario that he experienced, and just saying, like, it took me 3 days to remember things that somebody else is chirping in my ear that I did wrong, and I couldn't even remember because of how high stress this situation is.
And the other part of that too is and especially it's kind of a negative byproduct of body cams, is a body cam shows this, right? But what if I'm looking that way? That's where I'm focused.
Right.
Or even if my body cam is focused straight ahead, I might be focused on one thing. And I completely miss what's here. That's what tunnel vision is. And
that's exactly how he explained it.
Yeah, all the studies on, especially police high stress environment, your field of vision goes from here to here. So it's not fair to the officer to hold him. You should have saw this happening over here. No. I'm focused on this gun. That's the only thing that can kill me right there. And so that's why we're so big on hands, right? Show me your dang hands. Why is that so hard?
Yeah.
That's the only thing that can kill us is your hands. So if you're unwilling to show me that, I'm going to be on high alert.
Right. Don't you have to assume the worst?
Yeah. And we're going to take this to a whole nother level if you want to play that game.
Right.
And then people then blame the officers for taking it to that level. Show me your hands.
Yeah.
It's that simple. You know, and it goes along with there's campaigns out there. I've said this before, and I actually read it yesterday on a police organization that's been pushing this, you know, in terms of if you feel that the police actions are inappropriate or incorrect, comply, then complain. Don't fight with the officers and then complain about it later saying he had no right to do that, because 99 times out of 100 they did.
Right.
And you're going to end up in a really bad scenario. Comply, then complain. And then we just watch the video and then we'll assess it at that point.
Right.
And then everybody walks away safe.
Yeah.
Right? Because the cop's not going to go, oh, you're not going to go with the program, I'm just going to leave. That ain't how that works.
Right.
You do that, you lose control of everything. Right? And you kind of got a glimpse of that in 2020, what that looks like.
Yeah.
And how's that
scary.
been? How's that been?
Yeah. That's scary.
So.
I would highly recommend doing the simulator.
Yeah. That's probably the best thing I can offer, because nothing else can really, other than being in a ride-along, and even ride-alongs, you know, sometimes it's when you're in the safety and security of that car and you're not getting out in the thick of it, doesn't give you the full test of it.
And I mean, I would say too, anybody you talk to that's done the simulator, it is a real life, even though they know they're in, it's screens and stuff, real life, they feel the anxiety.
Well, they'll put them under the heart rate monitors, and you'll watch the heart rates go up to 200, and so, and
they have real physical, you know, things that happen to them as a result of being just in that simulated situation.
That's probably one of the best best things that I can say helps everybody kind of at least understand. You're not going to understand what it's like unless you do it, but it at least gives you some perspective of how hard it is to make decisions under stress like that.
Perspective is a good word. It gives you the perspective.
Yeah.
What would you say? We talked earlier about your daughters, and they're 21, and you would not recommend that they go into law enforcement at this moment.
No.
They're not ready.
Yeah. Them. Yes.
What do you say to young people to encourage a career in law enforcement, and what do you say to their parents to encourage their parents to let go and encourage that career?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because you hear that a lot now of why would I want my son or daughter to be a police officer, and would you let your son or daughter be a police officer, right? And so that's a great question, and I'll tell you this. Being a police officer, if you do it right, is one of the most noble, fulfilling professions that you'll ever experience. You get to every day, you make a difference, right? Maybe you didn't do anything special that day, but your presence, the fact that you're there, the fact that maybe you deterred something that you didn't even know you deterred, you make a difference. And if you see it that way, the fulfillment is off the charts. Are there times where it's frustrating? Yep. Are there times where, you're banging your head against the wall? Yeah, absolutely. Do you have to accept certain things like, yeah, you know what? There's a certain section of society that's not going to care for for you or what you do.
Sure.
It's life, right? So you can, in terms of having a good life, the financial stability, the pension, the benefits, all that is there. And you don't have to have some specialized college degree to do it. You don't have to be, go through some 4-year apprenticeship and do any of that. So what you do need is the core values to be able to do it. We want good people to be police officers, right? Those good core values. And that's what we look for, and that's what we test for.
Sure.
When we do our testing. I'm not doing memory tests with our people anymore, stuff like that. We're doing core value tests. And what's interesting is since we switched to that, we've had a much higher success rate in our training program even. So it's really interesting. So in talking about your own kids, I've never discouraged my own kids what to do. One of them is actually in the Army right now, and she's a military police officer. And I've talked to her about getting into law enforcement and had those conversations. And, I tell her right now she ain't ready to do it, so it's not like it's a secret. But I think by the time she would gets out of the Army and has some of that maturity, show, and it does even to this day, that she would be ready if she wanted to. And I would certainly encourage her to do that. And I would encourage her as a parent, as a citizen, because we need good people to be police officers. And you can't have our way of life without sacrifice. Sure. Right? Whether that's military, other first responders, we have to have good people do that, and people willing to step up and do it. If everyone says, well, not my kid, well, whose kid is it going to be then? Sure. Right? Do I understand the life? Do I understand the dangers of it? Sure I do. But I also know we need good people to be police officers. So,
what's the first step to becoming an officer? Somebody sitting, listening, that's 22 or 23. Yeah. What's their first step?
Yeah, so everybody's path may be different, right? Maybe if somebody wants to go to college, okay, go to college. You don't have to go to college if you don't want to. Our minimum age requirement is 21 years old. Okay. So if you're 21 years old, you can apply, and then you go through our process. You fill out your application, and then what we do is we basically walk you through it from then on. Okay. We try to do it fast because, and people don't understand this either, is we're only able to hire 3 times a year because there's only 3 police academies per year, and everybody's got to go to the police academy. So us and every other police department across the state is all hiring at the same time. Sure. So, that presents a struggle because we're all competing for the same people and all of that stuff. Fighting to get spots into the academy classes. There's times where we've been able to hire more people, but there's no academy spots. Sure. And so you apply. We then walk you through the process. There's it's called the National Testing Network. You can be living in California and take this test in California for the Decatur Police Department. You do not have to come to Decatur. Okay. It's all across the entire country. You can go to a testing center, or they have it set up where you can test in your living room. Okay. You just have to set it up to do it that way. COVID helped us out with that one. In being able to do the online type stuff. And so if you pass that, then we set you up for an interview real quick. If you pass the interview, then we have to put you through the physical fitness test. Okay. The fitness test is not, in my opinion, hard, but what's interesting is a lot of people fail out of that. We probably get 30-40% of our people fail out of that. You're seeing the same thing out of the military where they're having people struggle to pass the physical requirements to get in. Okay. So one thing I will tell you, if you want to prepare, start getting in shape. Sure. The standards are published online. They're actually on our website, so you know what you would need to present. Yeah. It's like being given a test with 4 questions, and I'm going to tell you what the answers are. Come ready. Okay. Right? You pass that, then you're set. The next hiring group that would be ready, you'd be hired in that group. If you fail the test, we will allow you to continue to try to improve until it gets to a certain point where, okay, now we're at the end of this testing process, so you're done here, but we can move you forward to the next one while you continue to improve.
Sure.
We're even, if you feel you want or need a personal trainer, we will set you up a personal trainer and we'll pay for it.
Oh, okay. So there's really not an excuse.
We pay for the test.
Okay.
There is no financial obligation to the person applying at all. So there is no, I can't get there in transportation.
Sure.
There is no excuse.
Okay.
Any of those barriers that people may have said occurred before where, to be fair, hey, we're only testing on this one day here in Decatur. Okay, well, then you can't make it on that weekend for whatever reason. Now all those are gone.
Okay.
And then, so as in the middle of all that, we're doing a background on you as well.
Okay.
So that's where we're checking your job history, your education history, references, talking to people that may know you, your neighbors and all that stuff. This is like no background that, any other job does. We're trying to find if you're a good person. And if you're not, then we'll fail you on the background.
Okay.
Looking at financial situation, if you've been sued 13 times for small claim stuff or whatever, or the last house you were in, you decided to tear it all up before you moved out, that's a problem.
Sure.
And so, those are the type of things that we look at. And really, again, part of the background is when we're talking to people that may know you and or you worked with or for, what's their core values?
Sure.
What's their work ethic? Things like that. I can teach you how to do the job. I can't teach you how to be a good person.
Right.
So,
that's
really kind of the process. It's not difficult, and we will walk you through the whole thing too. So,
okay. Anything else you'd like to share before we part?
No, going back to kind of what you said to touch on again, because I really think it's a really good question about, why would somebody want to be a police officer? Why would you want to encourage, somebody or love to be a police officer? And again, going back to two things. One, the fact that those people that then do step into that role have a significant impact in their community, and all the things that are associated with maintaining law and order within the community. That's their role.
Sure.
And without it, we live in chaos. And if not them, then who? If they're a good person, and could be a good path for them forward in life for whatever situation you're in. I mean, we've hired people that I've always wanted to be a police officer, went to college, and now I'm a police officer, kind of like me. We've hired people that worked in ADM for 6-7 years and said, I really wasn't feeling good about what I'm doing, and I wanted to do something that made a difference. And they've come and they're fantastic. Yeah. It's all walks of life. It's about who you are as a person, and who do you see in some of your friends that go, man, that guy would be a good police officer and would really make a difference. And think about those things, because we as a community, need that. No matter what community you live in, it doesn't have to be Decatur. Every community needs that. And we need to step up and encourage people to do that.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate you joining us, and good luck out there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Make sure to like and follow Decatur Earth Mover Credit Union on our social channels for more content.